Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. Hello and welcome to this week's show, which is going to have a stripped back format and less information than you would normally get. I've been unwell all week and have been unable to do research into introversial news and haven't really picked up on the question of the week either, so I do apologise. However, last week I did a superb interview with Alistair Greener. Alistair is a communications speaker and consultant, event MC and TV presenter. Alistair and I have been talking about presentation skills and the relevance of communication styles and personality types to your presentations. Because the one thing I've realised is that whether you're introverted and think you can't present, when actually you can, or extroverted and think you can present, when very often you can't. So let's hear what Alistair has to say on the subject. Welcome, Alistair.
Hi, John. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me onto your podcast.
It is brilliant to catch up and have this discussion because we've talked a lot about presentation skills, the relevance of communication styles, personality, and how that all meets together. It's your area of expertise. So I'd really like to unpick some of that in terms of different personalities, but obviously mainly introvert, extrovert. But just before we dig into that, are you an introvert, an extrovert? And more importantly, what difference it made to your career?
It's interesting. I probably am more of an extrovert. Certainly, if you speak to anybody who knows me, they will always say I'm an extrovert. But I think, like any performer, you are probably a little bit more introverted than you realise because you become a character, you become a personality. And therefore, you can often appear extroverted, even though you're not. So you hide behind maybe your role, you hide behind a particular performance that you're giving. So I'm probably not quite as extroverted as I might come across, but I'm definitely on that side of the fence.
I think about many of the people you and I see on stage, and as you say, most people have assumed, in fact, I've been often told it, John, you can't possibly be an introvert because you like presenting on a stage. But lots of the people up on stage are introverts and they present incredibly well.
Yes, and I think it is a very common misconception that you and I have talked about before of pigeonholing people just because of the way they look. For example, people look at actors and comedians, and I've worked with numerous actors and comedians over the years, and to assume because they're on stage, because they like to perform, that they are extroverts. And that, I think that's a big mistake to assume that.
Definitely. So why are presentation skills relevant to everybody? Because we don't all stand up on stage.
It's interesting. People always see presentation skills as delivering a big keynote in front of a conference, where the reality is we are all presenting every moment of the day. And if we want to get our message across in a way that will ensure people listen and then act upon what we say, we need to be able to present. I mean, that starts as children. When we start negotiating with our parents for things, that's a form of presentation skill. So we all need them and we all have them to varying degrees of success. So I don't see it as purely as a way of communicating when you're on the big stage or whether you're delivering a keynote online or you're on TV. I see this as a skill whether you're in a meeting, whether you're talking to your boss, whether you're talking to just a small team of people. We all need to understand some core techniques that will help us get our message across in a more powerful way and a more effective way that people will actually listen to us.
That's a really good way of looking at it. So if you're managing people, you've got to communicate with them, you've got to influence them to do something. If they don't hear your message properly, they're not going to do it.
Exactly. And it's one of those things that in every single role we have, I often love it when people say, well, I don't really deal with people in my work. Really, we all deal with somebody, even if it's just our boss, we're dealing with someone. The chances are we might not be dealing with clients, we might not be in sales dealing with clients in that way, but we all have to communicate with different people. And if you want your message to land in the most powerful and effective way, just understanding a few simple techniques is really going to help you. Now, of course, if you are delivering a keynote or you're delivering a key presentation to a group of people, yes, there's maybe a few additional skills that you'll need, but actually it all comes down to very much the same thing.
So, give us a couple of those skills. What would you say is the most important thing?
The first thing is, what is it that you want to communicate? And then once you've decided what you want to communicate, is then understanding your audience in terms of where they are. So, for example, I use a phrase that you will be very familiar with, the what's in it for me syndrome.
Mhm.
The person you're talking to, what's in it for them by listening to what you have to say? There's no advantage, if there's nothing that they're going to gain from it, why would they bother listening to you? And then it's a case of packaging your message in a way that's going to resonate to them. I often put it in the form of someone on one side of the bridge and the person you're trying to convince is on the other side of the bridge. And too many people shout across the bridge, where actually the easiest way to convince them is to cross to the other side and then walk them over with you. And if you use that kind of principle, you're going to be far more effective in getting your message across.
Well, I love that analogy as well. Or you go and stand in the middle together, but what's the point in shouting at each other?
Yeah.
Craziness. Yeah. So, personalizing the message, and I like that. What's in it for me? But what would I do? Say I'm a leader, and I've got a group of people that work for me who may be introverts, maybe extroverts. Do I have to present differently because of that mixture?
I think understanding your audience is absolutely crucial. But the reality is, you quite rightly say, you're going to have introverts and extroverts in the same group normally. And if you do, then you just have to consider both sets of individuals when you're communicating. So, for example, you often see some town hall meetings where somebody will say, put your hand up if you've got a question.
Oh yeah.
Well, we all know that introverts aren't going to be the first people to put their hands up. So, therefore, the answers you get and the questions you get might be slightly skewed towards an extrovert view. So, think about breakout groups. And if you do have breakout groups, whether that's online or in person, make sure that you give really specific instructions to the person who's running each group. So put someone in charge. Sometimes it could be the introvert, whoever it is. An introvert often likes a purpose. And if they've got something that they've got to do, then actually that makes it a little bit easier for them. But make sure that they're very clear on what they need to achieve in that group. And in a smaller group where somebody's managing it to make sure that everybody gets their point across, you're going to get far more effective feedback. The other thing I think is really good is use different engagement tools. We all learn different ways. I'm personally a fan of PowerPoint. Some people hate it, providing it's done well. But visual images, forget the words, visual images with impact will appeal to a whole set of individuals who might not be the audio experts, who don't listen as well. So having all those different engagement techniques will ensure that your message lands in a more effective way.
Like that. I think there's a really important point you picked up on, which was about introverts. It gets assumed sometimes that, oh no, they don't want to say anything. They make incredibly good facilitators of groups like that. Partly because, as you said, they have a purpose and that makes it much easier for them. Partly because they are naturally very good at listening and summarizing. Two great skills for a facilitator.
Absolutely. And actually, it's one thing that introverts who are speaking in front of groups of other people, the one thing that introverts will do really well is they will feel the audience, they will listen to the audience. And that's something that extroverts might be wonderful presenters and quite flamboyant in the way that they present. But if they're not feeling and listening to their audience, they're going to miss out on some real key clues that could help them steer their presentation in a direction that's going to ensure that they are actually heard. So there's a lot of skills that both introverts and extroverts can learn from each other when they are presenting.
So perhaps it's a good time to go, if I am an extrovert and I'm presenting, give me one or two quick things that I could do to improve my presentation skills.
It's interesting, I tend to do this quite a lot. I get very excited about my subject and I go off at 100 miles an hour. Usually for an extrovert, they probably should consider slowing down. And my big thing is the power of the pause. I love the pause. It's so effective. It gives you time to think, gives your audience time to think, and most importantly, it can add that lovely light color balance to what you're talking about. So those are probably the key things, I think, for an extrovert, and definitely taking that time to pause and really listen and feel your audience and feel where they are in terms of the way your message lands.
Yeah, and that pause can really help to create some drama sometimes and make people listen.
I see what you did there.
Oh, good. Well, I thought I did it anyway. How about the other way around? If I'm an introvert and I've got to improve my presentation skills, what couple of things might I do there?
Quite often, introverts will be people who aren't the first ones to put their hands up and therefore offer themselves as someone who presents. And actually, by virtue of that, they won't have as much practice sometimes as extroverts. And I don't believe in practice makes perfect. I believe that practice makes progress. And the more you practice, the more you do it, first of all, the more confident you will become. And secondly, the better you will become, the more polished you become. People don't become great presenters by accident. It's usually by doing it over and over again and really honing the craft. If you are an introvert who's a little bit nervous, then really, really think about some of those great breathing techniques that you can use to really boost your confidence. They will make the world of difference. And the final thing really is possibly be a little bit more of you. Authenticity is absolutely crucial when you present, but we can be a 10% more than we are and still remain authentic. And I think that just enables you to put a bit more energy into your voice, a little bit more energy into what you do. And that then becomes a lot more engaging for your audience. Just be a little bit more than you.
So it's not about changing you, it's just about being more you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And I love that phrase, practice makes progress. So good.
I do some work in schools, and it was a 9-year-old in Northampton who taught me that. And I'd never heard it before. And I just thought, that's brilliant. And I've been using it ever since.
But isn't that a great point? We listen to the audience, and that's we as presenters learn from that as well.
And it's interesting, extroverts aren't always the best at listening, but you can pick up on all sorts of things when you actually listen, give other people a chance to engage with you and to give their feedback. And actually, a quick word on feedback. I think that's really important for both introverts and extroverts. Feedback is incredibly important, both receiving and giving feedback. Giving feedback, I give a little bit of feedback and I see how it lands. If it lands well, and they clearly want more feedback and they're seeing it as objective feedback, then I will offer more. If they become a little bit defensive, maybe a little bit concerned, then I will hold off. There's no value in giving any more feedback because maybe that feedback isn't really what they wanted. They just wanted me to say how wonderful they were. And likewise, when you're receiving feedback, make sure you are getting objective feedback. Don't just seek endorsement, seek some really valuable points. And then look for patterns. Sometimes we hang on one person's opinion and we think, right, okay, I must do that. I don't worry about one person's opinion. I look for patterns in feedback. And if a lot of people are saying, you're speaking too fast, I really find it hard to pick up from you, then that's something worth having. If it's just one person, that's just somebody's perception. Worth hearing only if it leads to other patterns that you can pick up on later.
So, Alison, we've come to the end, I'm afraid. However, I'm absolutely sure that some of the listeners will be going, how can we get back in touch with this guy? What's the best way for people to do that?
Go to the website, presentyourself.co.uk, or start a conversation with me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really good to catch up.
It's a real pleasure, John, as always, and really enjoying the series of podcasts you're doing.
Thank you.
And you taught me a lot. I remember when you came and spoke to our group at PSA, and you taught me that whole thing about introverts think to talk and extroverts talk to think. And I now use that when I'm talking to people all the time, but I do always credit you because it's a real pearl of wisdom. So thank you.
So I shall steal your practice makes progress one and credit you as well. Thank
Pleasure.
you very much, Alison.
Cheers, John.
Just before I go, 2 big requests. Number 1, would you like to come on and discuss your specialist subject and how it relates to introvert, extrovert on the show? If so, I'd love to talk to you. Drop me a line. And number 2, what question would you like answered about introversion? Go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk and there's a box for you to put your question. I look forward to answering it. I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk. introversion.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.